Ever wondered how many countries play rugby at the international level? From global powerhouses to small island nations with huge passion, this is every national rugby team, every flag, every heartbeat behind the jersey. This is the story of world rugby. One nation at a time. Let's start with the top of the mountain. These are the national teams that not only dominate the sport, but also define it. You'll hear them referred to as Tier 1 nations. They're the heavyweights, the ones with deep rugby history, strong domestic leagues, and a constant presence at the business end of major tournaments like the Rugby World Cup and the Six Nations. New Zealand, the All Blacks. If you know rugby, you know the All Blacks. Even if you don't follow the sport, you've probably seen them perform the haka, that intense Maori war dance they do before matches. But they're not just famous for showmanship. This team has set the standard in world rugby for decades. 3 World Cup titles, a winning percentage that's almost unreal, and a culture built around discipline, skill, and national pride. Rugby in New Zealand isn't just a sport, it's a way of life. The All Blacks play fast, physical, and smart. If you're facing them, you're probably chasing shadows. South Africa, the Springboks. Then you've got South Africa, the Springboks. They don't just play to win, they play with purpose. Every tackle, every scrum feels like a message. Their story is powerful too. In 1995, right after apartheid ended, they hosted and won the World Cup. That moment wasn't just a sporting victory, it was a symbol of national unity. Fast forward, and they've won it again in 2007 and 2019. South Africa is built around raw physicality. Their forwards are monsters, their defense is brutal and they wear you down. But recently they've added flair to their game. They're not just powerful, they're complete. England was the first ever national rugby team. They've been around since the 1800s and their traditional tactical style reflects that. They're structured and disciplined and they rarely make silly mistakes. They won the World Cup in 2003 thanks to Johnny Wilkinson's famous drop goal, and they've been a consistent force in the Six Nations. English rugby is driven by its club system, which is one of the strongest in the world. When England gets it right, they're a machine, calm, clinical, and ruthless. France is the wild card of world rugby. On their best day, they can beat anyone. On their worst day, they can lose to anyone. That unpredictability makes them both exciting and frustrating to watch. But what sets France apart is their style. They play with flair. Their backs love open spaces, offloads, and running rugby. Lately, though, they've combined that creativity with structure. Their current squad is young, disciplined, and hungry. Hosting the 2023 World Cup gave them a boost, and France now looks more dangerous than ever. Australia, the Wallabies. Australia has a proud rugby tradition. They've won the World Cup twice in 1991 and 1999, and have consistently produced world-class talent. Historically, their strength has been their backline. Quick, creative, and clinical. But in recent years, they've struggled with consistency. Rugby competes with other sports in Australia like Aussie rules and rugby league, which affects depth. Still, the Wallabies remain one of the few teams you can never count out. When the pressure's on, they know how to rise. Ireland used to be considered a strong second-tier team, but not anymore. In the last decade, they've completely reinvented themselves. Their domestic teams dominate European club rugby, and the national team has become one of the most well-drilled, intelligent sides in the world. They've beaten the All Blacks multiple times in recent years, and are always a threat in the Six Nations. Their game is built on quick ball movement, smart decision-making, and relentless pressure. Even though they've never gone past the World Cup quarterfinals, nobody takes Ireland lightly. Scotland has a deep rugby history, but they've had a mixed modern era. They can't quite match the consistency of other Tier 1 nations, but they're always in the fight. Their strength lies in open play. Their backs are sharp, and they thrive when the game gets loose. They're also known for passionate fans and intense rivalries, especially with England. Scotland might not have the trophies, but they bring heart every single time. Wales punches above its weight. It's a small country, but rugby is woven into the culture. The Welsh sing at stadiums like it's a national choir, and the team feeds off that emotion. They've won multiple Six Nations titles and Grand Slams in the last 2 decades and have a knack for peaking at just the right moment. Their strength is often in the breakdown. They fight for every inch and their backs can explode from anywhere. When Wales is confident, they're one of the hardest teams to stop. But rugby isn't just ruled by the giants. Beyond the All Blacks, Springboks, and the rest of the elite, there's another group of nations, hungry, determined, and rising fast. These are the teams that have shaken up expectations, pulled off huge upsets, and earned global respect without the same depth or resources. The teams that have earned the world's respect through performance, not reputation. These nations aren't just background noise. They've taken on the big guys and made headlines. Some have been doing this for years, while others are only just starting to break through. But they all have one thing in common. They're closing the gap. Argentina, Los Pumas. Argentina is probably the best example of a Tier 2 nation that's punched its way into the big leagues. Los Pumas aren't a surprise anymore. They're a problem for anyone who takes them lightly. They made the semi-finals of the Rugby World Cup in 2007 and again in 2015. And they've had major wins over New Zealand, Australia, and England. Their game is built on passion, physicality, and a deep connection to their shirt. Argentina is also part of the Rugby Championship, competing against New Zealand, Australia, and South Africa every year. And that's helped them raise their level massively. They might not have the depth of the Tier 1 nations, but when their best 15 are on the pitch, they can beat anyone. Now, Fiji, there's something else. This is a nation where rugby isn't just the most popular sport. It's embedded into the culture. Everyone grows up with a rugby ball in hand, and it shows. They've always been known for their flair, offloads, and raw talent, especially in sevens where they've won Olympic gold medals, but in recent years their 15-side has become a real force too. In the 2023 Rugby World Cup, they reached the quarter-finals, knocking out Australia in the group stage, and they did it with control, structure, and grit, not just wild attacking rugby. That was a turning point. Fiji is no longer just a team you enjoy watching. They're a team you fear playing. Japan is another nation that's completely changed the narrative around them. For a long time, they were seen as outsiders. That changed in 2015 when they beat South Africa in one of the biggest upsets in rugby history. And it wasn't a fluke. In 2019, as host of the World Cup, they went even further. They reached the quarter-finals with wins over Ireland and Scotland, playing a high-speed, high-skill style that caught teams off guard. What's more impressive is how well coached and disciplined they are. Japan has invested in development, coaching, and infrastructure. And it shows. They've proven they belong on the big stage. Then there's Georgia. This team is all about forward power. Their scrum is one of the best in the world. Seriously. Ask any front row player and they'll tell you, Georgia's pack is no joke. Rugby is growing fast there, and while they haven't yet had that one breakout tournament like Japan or Fiji, they've consistently dominated the European lower tier, and they've pushed top teams hard. They've been asking for a spot in the Six Nations for years, and while that hasn't happened yet, they're getting harder to ignore. Samoa and Tonga. And we can't leave out Samoa and Tonga. These Pacific Island nations have produced some of the most powerful, fearless players the game has ever seen. Players from both countries have starred for top clubs and even other national teams because of how many Pacific Island players qualify for bigger unions like New Zealand or Australia. But when they play for their home countries, it's personal. You can see it in the way they defend, the way they hit, and the pride they bring. What's held them back in the past is not talent, but funding, infrastructure, and player availability. But with new eligibility rules allowing players to return and represent their countries of heritage, both Samoa and Tonga are starting to build much stronger squads. They're still underdogs, but they're getting closer. These teams are proof that rugby is no longer just about a few rich nations dominating. The gap is closing. The talent is global now. And with better support, better coaching, and the right systems in place, any one of these teams could shake up the world stage. Now talk about teams that don't always get the spotlight. But honestly, they deserve more attention. Portugal surprised a lot of people at the 2023 Rugby World Cup. They didn't just show up, they played with flair, energy, and purpose. They even drew with Georgia and beat Fiji in the final pool game, which was a massive moment for them. The thing about Portugal is that they're still developing. Rugby isn't huge there yet, but it's growing fast. They've got young talent, smart coaching, and a real identity. If they can keep the momentum going, they could become a regular fixture at future World Cups. Then there's Uruguay, another team from South America that's slowly building a strong foundation. Los Terras are well organized, disciplined, and never back down from a fight. They've qualified for multiple World Cups and are producing more professional players than ever before. Uruguay might not be pulling off huge wins just yet, but they're clearly on the rise. And that's important for rugby's long-term growth outside the traditional power bases. Romania. You can't talk about emerging nations without mentioning Romania. Back in the 1980s, they were considered one of the best teams in Europe outside the Five Nations. But after political and economic instability, rugby took a backseat. They're still rebuilding and still producing physically strong players, especially in the forwards, but they haven't quite reconnected with their former glory. Still, they're a team to respect, and when they're on form, they're hard to handle. These teams might not be competing for world titles, Jumbo, yet, but they're playing with everything they have. They show up, they improve, and they make sure that rugby continues to grow in new corners of the world. There are also teams that are just starting, the ones with limited resources, small followings, but big dreams. These aren't teams you'll see in the knockout stages of a World Cup, at least not yet, but they're putting in the work. For a lot of them, rugby is still developing at the grassroots level. The infrastructure might not be there yet, but the ambition is. Chile is a great example. They qualified for their very first Rugby World Cup in 2023, and that wasn't by accident. They beat Canada and then the United States to get there, two teams with more experience and more resources. But Chile came in with heart, smart coaching, and a unified squad. And even though they didn't win a match in the tournament, just getting there was a massive step forward for South American rugby. It also shows how much depth the Americas are starting to build outside of Argentina. Namibia is a bit of a different case. They've qualified for a bunch of World Cups, they're regulars, but they've never won a match in the tournament. Still, that says something about their consistency in the African qualification process. Most of their players are semi-pro, and they often face Tier 1 teams in the group stage, which is a brutal experience. But the exposure matters. It's how they grow. The hope is that with more investment and game time, they can eventually break through and get that first win on the big stage. And then you've got countries like Spain, Kenya, Germany, Brazil, and even Hong Kong. Most of these nations aren't regulars at the Rugby World Cup yet, but they're growing. Spain came very close to qualifying in 2023, but got disqualified over eligibility issues. Brazil has invested a lot in sevens and is slowly trying to grow the 15 game. Kenya has raw athletic talent but needs more structure. Germany and the Netherlands have strong youth programs and solid domestic leagues, but they're still behind in terms of international competition. These teams may not be winning big matches yet, but you can see the groundwork being laid. These countries are chasing something bigger than just results. They're trying to create a rugby culture from the ground up. It takes time, but the direction is promising. And as the sport continues to globalize, these so-called newcomers are going to matter more and more. So that's the landscape of international rugby. Every national team, from the world champions to the ones still chasing their first win, all playing their part in what makes this sport so unique. Rugby isn't just about trophies or rankings, it's about identity. It's about how a country expresses itself on the field, through power, speed, structure, creativity, or just pure resilience. Every team has a story. Every match is part of something bigger. And what's exciting is how the game keeps evolving. New teams are emerging, old powers are being challenged, and every World Cup feels like a reset, a chance for something historic to happen. But what do you think? Which of these teams do you think can upset the elite teams? Well, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.